In this video we're going to learn about analytics dashboards. We're going to explore the templates that are available in every new model that we create. We're going to understand how we can edit those templates and also create new dashboards. So let's start by looking at our first template. This is comparing all the scenarios that we've run within our model, and it's comparing the three key elements of financials against service and also against risk. So remember, every time you run an optimization or simulation within Cosmic Frog, we will always score that scenario for risk. So now let's take a look at the transportation flows summary. And this dashboard is scenario specific. We're looking at the baseline currently, and we're looking at order assignments. So this is the assignment of customer demand to distribution centers. We can also look at procurement and replenishment in terms of flow types, and we can go in and we can set filters around different products. So we can see the outbound flows in terms of units and also inbound flows to each of the customers. We have a summary showing us total transportation cost, and we also have a high risk score here. This is mainly because everything's single sourced. We can then see how the handling and transportation costs break down by each of the distribution centers. And if we just take note of Philadelphia and Chicago, if we move between scenarios and we now go to scenario 3, where Detroit DC is closed, then we can actually see that Philadelphia and Chicago are now flowing more volume out to service the customers as Detroit DC is no longer available in that scenario. For our production summary, this is also scenario specific. We can filter by products, so we can see our raw materials here and also our finished products. And we can also filter this report by specific bill of materials where that product's been converted. So at a glance, we can see the total number of units that have been sourced and produced and the cost associated with that. Where raw materials are coming in from suppliers, we can see those volumes coming in from those facilities. And we can also see the volumes of finished goods that are coming out of the factories at Princeton and El Baggio. And in terms of production costs, the bill of materials associated with these two factories, this is the cost associated with producing that finished product using those bill of materials. And if we change scenario where we've removed the flow constraint, we can now see that the total production cost drops quite dramatically, and we're seeing a real saving because we're not making consumables at the Princeton factory anymore, and actually that volume is moving across to El Baggio. You can see there's a lot more volume there, and that's picking up a much cheaper production cost against that bill of materials for consumables. For site summary, we're looking at the baseline, and we can also look at both facilities and suppliers. Here we can see the total fixed operating cost. That's the only cost associated with DCs in the model at the moment. We can also see the aggregate risk score. In a moment we'll go down and we'll have a look at the detail that sits underneath that. And then we also get a summary of inbound and outbound units, so flowing into the sites, flowing out of the sites. And where we've looked at investment, opening and closing sites, we can see the startup and the closing costs associated with those capital investments. Now let's take a look at some of the detail associated with sites and risk. So our risk engine runs on the back of optimization and simulation for every scenario. And we can see that it's scored different categories in terms of, geographic risk, proximity to biolabs and nuclear facilities, political and economic risk, risk associated with natural disasters, and also COVID. And if we move through, we can see for each facility, for Charleston, for Chicago, exactly how that overall risk score has been made up against each of those categories. And finally, we can also see the risk score against every single customer and the demand that's been serviced. So here for this particular customer, CZ738, we can see how that breaks down across those risk categories. And we can also go in and filter on product groups. So if we just want to see the risk associated with the demand for rockets against each of those customers, we can go in and easily see that data as well. Now let's take a look at creating a new dashboard. We can either duplicate existing templates or we can create new dashboards from scratch. I'm going to create a new dashboard and I'm going to name that my new dashboard. Once we've created that new dashboard, we can link it to a visualization. So we need to be able to go and select the data that we want. So I'm going to bring my network summary table for optimization. And then once I've selected that table, I'm able to see all of the columns that are available to me. So we can decide what type of visualization we want. So we have all sorts of grids, different graph controls, gauges, also some basic map capabilities, and we can even go and add in other custom controls if we want to. We also have the option to join to other data sets. So if I wanted to join to other tables, I could, and we can also create calculated fields. So let's bring across some data. I'm going to bring scenario name across as the label, and we'll take our total supply chain cost and we'll put that in the values field. We can see here that now automatically renders that graph. You can also add multiple values. So if I take out total supply chain cost and move across to total transport cost, then I can also take the total production cost, and I can also take the fixed operating cost. We can see that as we add those values, it renders the graph. And I might want that as a stacked bar instead of a column, and then we can start to see how those costs stack up against each other. We can also click on any of the fields that we've selected in the report, and we can change the name that gets rendered in the control. We can decide how it's aggregated, whether we're summing it, averaging it, counting rows, taking min max, and then we can also format it in terms of currency and the number of decimal places. So now I've got my visualization built, I can click the tick box and that will show the visualization as part of the dashboard, and then I can click to save that dashboard, and I now have my new dashboard. Now let's look at editing an existing dashboard. So I'm going to go and continue building my new dashboard. So we can put the dashboard into edit mode, and I can add a new visualization to that dashboard. I'm going to select the table optimization sites, and I'm going to create my new visualization against this table. So I want to see by each facility the total amount of outbound quantity that's flowing, and I want to see that as a bar, but I only want to see that for facilities. I don't want the suppliers in there. So this is where we can add a filter to the visualization, and I'm going to select site type, and I'm only going to select facility as that type, and that will apply that filter to the visualization. So I'm just going to edit this and call it outbound units, slightly nicely formatted, and we'll call this flows from facilities. So if I click and submit that visualization, that's now been added to this dashboard, and we can see it alongside the network summary visualization that we created. Now the chart on the right hand side is actually showing the units for all scenarios. I want to be able to filter down on that. So this is where we can add dashboard filters. So I can select a data source, and I'm going to select the same table as before, optimization sites. And I can select a field that I want to apply that filter by. So if I select scenario name, we can select multiple values. In this example, because I want to look at one scenario at a time, I'm going to select required selection but not allow multiple values. And then what we can do is we can connect it. So I'm going to connect it to my flow from facilities visualization, and that has now created that filter. So having saved those changes, we can now see that my new dashboard has been updated. I can see both visualizations as part of that dashboard, and we can see that I've currently got the baseline selected in that dashboard filter that I've created. And if we look, we can see that there's about 900,000 units flowing out of Detroit. And if I change scenario where Detroit DC is now closed, then we can see that that filter has been applied to this visualization, to this chart, and there's no longer any volume flowing out of the Detroit DC. We can also edit any of the templates that are currently available. So if we select site risk summary, for example, we can go and get behind that dashboard, and in edit mode we can go into the visualization, and we can change the data that's been included. We can change labels, we can also add new visualizations to that dashboard. And of course we could duplicate that dashboard if we wanted to, so we could take effectively a copy of that template and we could continue building on it from there. So we've seen a summary of the templates, which are allowing us to understand the financial, service and risk implications of all of our scenarios. We've also looked at how we can create new dashboards, how we can edit existing dashboards, and this means that we can create very powerful analytics that allow us to really tell the story behind the scenarios that are within our models.